Thank you everyone for attending this session for the strategy follow-up and realization of the organization vision and mission. My name is Mahmoud Arafa, and as Pavana was kind enough to introduce me, I have been doing project management, strategy management for the last 25 years. And I'll be talking today, I will start actually by binding with my colleagues' notes, which they spoke yesterday, in fact. They talked about the theme actually of the life today. Mr. Ghalib talked about the importance of the strategy management, the importance of having an e-governance strategy to bring Kuwait again and bring the Middle East actually to be to cope with the current trends of having everything electronically. He talked about the social distances from the perspective of the service providers, where internally they don't meet each other these days, and externally where they don't meet customers, where clients will do transactions remotely. Mr. Ahmed, in fact, from Cisco, he talked about the COVID effect and where the business will remain with the COVID effect for a very, very long time, even after the pandemic is over. Mr. Ayman talked about the project management and the importance of having the task assigned to people. And I will bind all this together and see how we can combine all these things and manage them remotely, yet achieving our strategy, achieving our tasks, and making sure our projects are in order. The session today will talk about many things, but particularly from the perspective of the COVID and working remotely, but how can we have strategy in place and making sure it is effective, operational, and getting the result which we have. So I will start by talking about how to build a strategy, and I will not talk very much details about it. It will take about 2-3 days to talk about it, but here for the couple of minutes, we'll talk about how to build a strategy, how to set the execution plan, and then how to put the objectives and projects together to execute it. And finally, how to put things in perspective to have the vision and mission in effect. And this makes to make sure that our objectives are achieved. I'll start by the concept of the strategic planning, and we all do strategic planning with different perspectives. But the core message I want to pass here is strategic planning is a kind of holistic approach where everyone works together to formulate a kind of cross-functional approach and decisions to be taken that will help the organization to move from a place to another place competitively to achieve its objectives. I want to highlight here, I probably will talk about this in another slide. Planning for a strategy doesn't mean that you plan to do something. The strategy, the main output of the strategy is not to achieve an objective or to achieve a product. It is taking the organization from a place to another competitive place that helps the organization to achieve what they want. And we'll see what the essence of this during the couple of slides which are talking about. Having a strategy, in fact, it helps you to steer your operations. It helps you to identify your priorities and to identify what you need to do in the near and medium and far future. If you don't have a strategy, in fact, we cannot judge whether we are doing right or wrong. We cannot judge whether we are achieving our objectives or not. And more importantly, it doesn't help you to achieve, are you performing well or not? How can you judge your people? How can you judge your departments? How can you say you are doing well? You have to have a strategy to set your objectives, track the objectives, and then finally compare your objectives or the deliverables with what you wanted to achieve in the first place. There's a challenge here. I would ask the respected attendees, do you have a strategy? And probably at the beginning of the presentation, I wanted to highlight what Bhavana said. If you have any question or you have any comment on my challenges, please send them on the Q&A. At the end of the session, we'll talk about it. So a question to be posed to us. Do we have a strategy in place? And if you don't have a strategy, are you willing or your organization is willing or in the process of putting a strategy? When we think strategy, we think from different perspectives. The strategy planners should understand that looking at the same item makes many different meanings to different people. If we talk about reducing expenses, for example, someone thinks of the reducing expenses from his perspective, like the CEO, like the finance, is just reducing money. The HR thinks of the reducing expenses by firing people or reducing the training budget. On the other hand, the quality people and the engineers may not agree on the reducing expenses this way. They say probably you need to sell some assets, or probably you need to reduce the salaries of the top management. But the same subject they are looking at is reducing expenses. So when you put strategy, you need to talk to everyone. And this is why strategy is put together with all the people from organizations. When I say all the people, I don't mean only the top management, but every single person in their organization should be involved in creating the strategy. And the strategy, it goes through a certain framework. Basically, as we said earlier, it helps you to go from somewhere to another place where you are more competitive to achieve your objectives. So you start by identifying where you are today. The first step is you understand where you are today, what are your capabilities, and what you can do with your resources. And then step number 2 is to decide where you want to go. What are your options? Based on this, what you can achieve with this. And then how to go there. After deciding what your destination is, how you use the resources again to drive to the future. And which way is the best? It means you have many choices, and actually strategic decisions, they are actually about doing choices, tough choices. And finally, how to ensure that you arrive there, or you will arrive there. This is the framework. These are the steps which you go, the methodology which you do for the strategy implementation. You start by the preparation, where you look at your data. And again, this is to ensure where you are today. Then you put your vision and mission, you assess your environment, you set the objectives and KPIs, and then you execute it. There is another translation for the same slide, but with the output. This ladder shows what you do in every step. A certain team, we'll talk about this team in a second, a certain team sets the mission, vision, and the values of the organization. Then based on this, we set the objectives that achieve this mission. Then we put the performance measures or the key performance indicators to track these objectives. And then we agree on how we can achieve these KPIs by putting initiatives and projects. And finally, there's someone who will execute these projects. If you look at the left side, the blue side here, this is all about the strategic planning. And this is performed by the strategic people in the organization. On the right side, it is the operations of the strategy. And these two together, they work together, in fact, to get this is done. But we know from our experiences that these two teams are not always working together. And with this presentation and with a couple of tools I will show you, it will help, or we are trying to reduce the gap between the strategy team and the operational team. The strategy team, in fact, they look at certain functions. They put policies in place, they put the performance indicators, and they put the objectives to achieve. The project team and the people on the ground who do the daily work, they do the same thing, they achieve the same thing, but from different perspectives. They execute projects, they have tasks to do every day. In the morning, they wake up in the morning and they go to the office to achieve certain tasks. They go to the factories, they go to the development environment. And most of these people, they don't know anything about the strategy, yet they are working on the strategy. So there's a kind of misalignment between the strategy team and their objectives and the project management, the project team and their objectives. The strategy team, they care about having policies and they want you to adhere to the policy. They want the project team to adhere to the policy. On the other hand, the project management team or the people who are doing the job, they care about getting the job done. Sometimes they don't have time to read the vision or read the mission. They don't want to, from their perspective, they are wasting their time. Going back to the planning process, we start by understanding where we are now. We read our current environment. We look at our documentations, the policies, the annual reports, any governance in place. It tells us where we are, and we can identify what we should do in the future. Then we build our mission. I will not talk in details how the missions are built, but basically it tells you what your dreams are. These are examples of the mission statements. For 3M, they say our technology advances every company. Our technologies enhance every home, and our innovation improves every life. This is what they dreamed when they started the company, and probably they changed it in a couple of times. This is what was their dream when they started the company, that they'd work only on things with technology to advance people. Walmart's vision is to be the destination of customers to save money, no matter how they want to shop. They started by this. They wanted to make low price product with good quality. Walt Disney is to be one of the world's leading producers and providers of the entertainment and information. Simple statements, they only describe what you want to be in the future, how your dreams are. You shape your dreams, and then later on we see how can we achieve these dreams. On the other hand, the mission, it helps the people who put the vision what they should do. Because when I dream of something, I have to do the activities that help me to achieve this dream. Otherwise, I'm deviating from the dream. So again, 3M says, to achieve my vision, my mission is to solve unresolved problem innovatively. This is what we do. This is what the people go every day in the morning to do. They go to solve unresolved problems. Not any problem. They pick up the problems that no one can solve. Walmart, on the other hand, their mission or what they do every day is to save people money so they can live better. And this is what about the mission. It tells you what is the purpose of your operations, so that everyone knows the purpose. No one gets deviated from the purpose of our operations. Now we have the mission, we have the vision, and it's time now to put down how to achieve them. So we put the objectives and we disseminate this objective over the organization. It starts by the top management. They got the objective. Either they get the objectives from the board, where they tell the top management what they do, or actually the CEO or the owner or the minister, he thinks strategically and put the objectives that the organization needs to achieve. An example here is a CEO or the top management have got 3 objectives to achieve. How can he build the objectives for organization? In fact, he meets with all the departments and passes this objective to them. They cannot work on other objectives. They have to use the top management objectives and then break them down from every department who will put his input, how we can help or how he can help to achieve these objectives. So let us zoom on this area where these departments will meet together and meet with the top management, and every department will put his own objectives in place and share it to the organization. So the HR will pick up the first objective and they will study how can they contribute. So they think here, this objective, an example, the health and safety, is to maintain high awareness level of HNS. So from their perspective, they will do trainings, they will do awareness session to tell people how to achieve the high level of health and safety. The HR also will contribute in the second objective, the customer service. From their perspective, they will maintain the customer focus culture. So again, they will give training to the employee about the customer focus. And also they can help with the infrastructure objective by, by developing the technical resource capacity. And so on. For every department will pick up any objectives and they will put what they can contribute with. And you can see every department will have input almost to every objective. You will see for the IT, because they are a service provider, they will contribute to only one objective, which is no harm on this. But at the end of the day, the CEO will make sure that the overall picture is achieved and that the whole team will combine all these inputs. Whatever has been developed now, the CEO will look at this. The own objectives are satisfied. I have major objective, and then I have sub-objective where these sub-objectives, they are achieved. He thinks or he believes these 2 objectives will achieve the first one, and so on. On the other hand, the department see the same thing because they are going to achieve this. They are going to operate on this one. So they see the same thing. The HR sees his own 3 objectives. The support will see his own 3 objectives, and the IT will see their own 2 objectives. When they work, everyone works on his objectives, then the organization as a whole team will be achieved. In fact, this is what we call the perspective of the objectives. Everyone sees different view, but actually it is the same essence. regardless what do you see, work on what you see, then the organization will achieve the objectives. Then having these objectives in place doesn't mean they will be realized. They have to be monitored, making sure that we are progressing this one. So every objective will have its own key performance indicators. We'll talk about this in a couple of slides. Now, the challenge here is how to identify the objectives. How every department will sit with their own team to see what we can do. Again, don't forget we started by saying we started by analyzing where we are now. So we analyzed what we have, we analyzed our potentialities, we analyzed our strengths, and we realized our weaknesses. So they start here, or they start the session of the SWOT analysis. Basically, without going into the details, it tells you what you are good at. So you will make use of this strength and you realize what the opportunities in the market is. So you will try to take these opportunities. At the same time, probably you'll see where you are weak at. So either you avoid these areas of weakness or you strengthen yourself on this. You look at the threats as well. Who is the threat? What are the threats that handicaps you from doing your objectives? So again, you will handle these threats. Either you avoid the threat or you are trying to defend it. So the gap analysis itself, it starts by look at your current situation. In this example for the health and safety, it tells you that the health and safety team says the health and safety policies are not in place or they are not updated. And after they study more their past history, they realize that there is not enough appropriate resources in place to give training or to provide the necessary infrastructure for the health and safety. But what we want to be, what is the desired situation? We want to have a health and safety management system in place. We don't have something in place, we want to have something in place. So now we identified a certain area that we need to fill. And this is where the gap here is identified. If we achieve 20% of health and safety training per year, it means we are going to fill this gap. And also, if we ensure the health and safety orientation for all the new employees is done, then we are in a good position. We'll move for our current position, which we don't have good health and safety standards, into a position where we meet the safety and health and safety procedure. And if we hire resources to assign them to different key branches, then we'll cover this area. So this is the gap that if we do this, we'll achieve this area. And this is actually a place where we can find objectives. We can look here, if you look at these sentences, they look like actual objectives and they look like a kind of performance indicator, as we'll see in a couple of slides. The same example, the customer service will identify what the gaps are. The same thing with the infrastructure will identify what the gaps are. And collecting these together will help us to identify what the objectives are. Before we write the objective, there is a kind of notes we need to talk about. Objectives are not a task to be done. Objectives don't have a time limit. Objectives, they carry the sense of continuous operation. So we say improving the customer service. We don't see the objective itself to have customer service 20%. This is a performance indicator I will see in a second. But we say improve, increase, reduce. These are the terms we use in creating the objective. So we started by identifying the gaps by what we call the SWOT analysis. There are some other tools, in fact, which will not talk about this in the scope of this session. But we'll start here by looking at the result which we produced. This is what we have done. And then we will get every single gap analysis result and analyze them. So we'll get the first one for the health and safety. Remember, this was the last line we produced. Achieve 20% of health and safety training per year, etc. Then we'll start to drive the objective from here. Anyone reads these bullets, he can say we can have 3 objectives here. If we train the employees on H&S, if we train the employees, we'll definitely achieve the first one. So the manager of the health and safety will decide, I will take this an object. I can do that. I have the resources and I have the training budget for this. So this is an objective actually that has been created as a result of this gap analysis. From the customer service, again, the customer service team will analyze this gap filling area, where he will produce an objective of align with the new customer requirements. They have a problem that the customers don't get exactly what they want, so they identified if they align their operations with the customer requirements, they will be able to achieve this objective. So this is a second objective produced now. Then the IT infrastructure will look at this gap analysis result, and they will come up with an objective to increase the network uptime with a higher security. And this is what the process of creating the objective. It's not just sitting together in a meeting and think of objective. It's a matter of scientific approach where we drive the objectives from the problems which we have at the moment. Then after doing this exercise, we find that we have simple structure. The top level objectives, which are the 3 objectives of the top management, and then the level 2 objectives, which are the breakdown of every organization, of every department with their team, what they will do. So I have here in this example level 1 and level 2, and the levels increase by how deep your organization is. If you, for every level, so you have, let us say you have top management, you have sectors, you have departments, you have divisions, you have units, and you have individuals at the bottom of the hierarchy structure. So you'll have probably 6 levels. For the governments and the ministers, probably you reach to 7 or 6 levels at the point of time. From this structure, now I'll go back to this screen. We have here top level, and I have a second level. I will put this in a kind of a matrix to start doing some numbers with this. So I have here the first, this number 1, health and safety, is the first level of objective number 1. And this is the second level of every objective. And at this point of time, I want to bring how we track. The first thing to track is to identify how important the objective is. The top level objective, every layer should be equal to 100%. So I say the first objective may be as important as the second objective. So everyone will have 3%. The first, the weight of the first objective, 30%, the customer service 30%, and the infrastructure is 40%. The total must sum to 100%. And then when we look at the sub-objective, the total weight of the sub-objectives should also match 100% as compared to the parent objective. For these 2 sub-objectives, the total is 100%. The first one is 30%, the second one is 70%. And so forth for the other objectives. The second here is 60%, 40%, and this 20%, 80%. So I start by putting how important the objectives are by setting the weight for every and single objective. And looking at the weights which we put right now, it tells the relative weight within the objective itself. I will show it again here. The relative weight is how relative this objective to the parent objective or to the top level. The first level here, this is a repetition actually of the same screen, but with a different structure. So the first level, I have 3 objectives. Its the relative weight to the strategy is 30, 30, and 40. There's another definition here, it's called absolute weight, which is how important this objective to the whole strategy. It will show actually in the second level. In the second level we just mentioned now, the relative weight for these 2 objectives is 30 and 70. This objective number 1, the 1.1, is 30% compared to the first objective. But how important objective number 1 to the strategy as a whole? And this is what we call it the absolute weight. The absolute weight, it tells you how important to the whole strategy. If you look at this objective, which is 30%, in fact, to the top level of the objective, but it is only 9% to the whole strategy. And simply calculated by just multiplying the 30% of this one to the 30% of the top level. And by the same concept, the second one is 21%. 2.1 is 18%, 12%, 4%, and 36%. And using this approach and methodology, not only you have identified your objectives, but also you have identified how important every objective is. It helps you to set your priorities, to set your budget, of course. As my colleague previously in the previous session said, don't reduce the budget of the training. Who will tell us that? In fact, probably if there is a training objective here, you probably see 36%. Numbers will tell us where to reduce and where not to reduce. If the manager does not realize how important or how less important the item is, he will look at this matrix and the matrix will tell them what to do. In the example of my colleague in the previous presentation of don't reduce the training, probably in the matrix or in her matrix, the training here takes the higher value. So they should touch this objective. Based on these numbers, we can see here the sorting of the objectives. What are the most important ones, the 30%, or what are the less important ones? And total, as I said, they always have to be, it has to be normalized to 100%. Now we have the objectives in place. It is time now to track them. It doesn't make any sense that I put an objective printed in a nice book, or I hang it on the wall without knowing how I can make sure that my team will work on this one. I track the performance and control whether I am on the right track or not. So here it comes the key performance indicators. A performance indicator, in fact, is an indicator actually, just from the word is indicator, that indicate how we are performing. It's not how good or how bad, no, it's how we are performing. And this is why it's called performance indicators. In your organization, you can find hundreds, sometimes in places like manufacturers or oil and gas organizations, you have thousands of performance indicators. But not all performance indicators are reported to the management. These thousands are important, in fact, and everyone works on them. The operational people work on them, but they don't report every single indicator. They only report the key performance indicators. So the KPI, they are a subset of the whole organization indicators that pass to the management, and these are the ones that are tracked and tells us where we are doing, how we are doing, and where we are going. Are we going in the right direction or not? An example of performance indicator is I have an objective. Let's say here I have an objective to reduce transaction time. Whatever your business is, you want to reduce the time of the transaction because you see long lines and customers are complaining that the job is not done in the right time. So probably you put this objective to the team in charge for that to reduce the transaction time. The KPI for this is how you can tell the transaction time is now better. There are actually many ways, but we will sit together, or the team will sit together to discuss what is the most painful item the client is having and then decide. So the team decided to have two KPIs, to have the average transaction time to be reduced to be 1 minute. Probably now it is 10 minutes. We want to have it 1 minute. And also we want to have the number of served client per one teller or per one service provider to 300 clients. So if we achieve these two, we believe, or the team believes, that will reduce the transaction time. We'll talk about the KPI structure in a couple of slides later on. But this will bring up a subject we'll talk. I want you to think about it, the side effects of the KPI. And as Bhavana said, if you have any question, you can pass it. And please, if you have any comment about the challenge, what do you think the side effects of the KPI? So remaining still in the KPI, the measure, in fact, is just a gadget that helps you to see where you are and tells you, it measures what you are supposed to achieve. The measures which we talk about, the KPIs, there are two kinds of KPIs, a kind of lagging measure and another kind of leading measure. And when we put KPIs in our system, we need to mix both of them. And again, it will not be our subject for today, but this is the concept that is called balanced scorecard, where you mix between lagging measures and leading measure. The lagging measure, by definition, it's something that has happened in the past, that you completed already. example of this is the profits. You cannot say I profited next year, or I will profit next year. This is not an indicator, this is a target. So everything in the past is called lagging. I made a profit, I made a review, I opened a branch, or I increase the market share, etc. However, the leading measure, in the other hand, is what things you do that help you to achieve in the future. So training, actually, if we trained on something, it is a leading, because when you train, the training itself doesn't achieve anything to the organization, but it is the impact of the training that has been passed to the employees and the knowledge they gained, they will apply to the customer service probably, or to the innovation, or putting the new technology. And the training which you do in January, its effect may happen on February or maybe next year. And this is what we want to do. In fact, we want to build our capacities. We want to increase our increase our compliance to the procedures. We want to be certified. We want to be compliant with the international standards. All these things will help us in the future to achieve. So you probably mix in your KPIs these two levels of measures. And this is how it is structured. In fact, it tells you, it starts by the objective. So an example here is to improve the quality of a service. Its measure is, as I said earlier, you have tens of things to do to measure the objective. The team decides to take the number of recalls where you have defects, so you return back the goods which you just purchased, and they decide to put the KPI is the number of recalls should be less than 15 recalls per month. You see here the KPI always carries a number and a time. How much you want to achieve and when you want to achieve it. Normally, this is per quarter or per month, and you have a target for every month or quarter, and then you carry on the follow-up with your team every period. Another example here is to reduce expenses. This is the objective, reduce the expenses. And what we are going to measure, again, there are tens of things to measure, but we'll measure only about the cost of products. We need to bring down the cost of our product less amount. It is not, they decide not to reduce the training. They decided not to sell assets. They wanted to find ways to reduce the cost of the products. This will help the other teams to think in the same direction. So they will think of different providers. They will think for cheaper or less expensive raw material. No one will think of reducing the training. No one will think of selling assets, because this is not the direction of the management. So the KPI is the cost expenses should be less than $2 million, probably in a year or 2 years. Increase customer satisfaction. Again, the KPI here is to have the customer satisfaction rating to be above 85%, extend market, and so forth, and so forth, and so forth. And so this is how I start linking the objective with the KPI that I'm going to control. KPI interactions, actually, it is very important because it describes how the objective will be achieved. And at the same time, excuse me, and at the same time, it guides the team how to select projects. So KPIs, well, let me start with the first one. Objectives, normally, as we said, is a verb, increase customer satisfaction. The KPI is the number which you want to achieve, whether it's dollar or it is a number. But here it is tells you what project is needed to achieve this KPI. And when I put a project here that achieves the KPI, it means also this project achieves the objective. So somehow projects are related to the KPIs and objectives at the same time. And this will be the first step where the organization will have a guideline. Are we doing the right project or not? No one can tell if the project is right or wrong unless if you have a KPI. And you cannot have a KPI unless you have an objective. And again, as we said, if you don't have objective, you don't have a strategy, and you cannot tell what you should do and whether you're doing the right thing or not. And this is why in many organizations you find there are some projects that they seem redundant and waste of money and time, yet they are still under operations. In some other organization, you'll find a project that's running for a year or two, and eventually they kill the project. But they find that it's of no use. It doesn't help the organization. In fact, it's not only not helping, it is bleeding the organization resources away from the right direction that it should be put. The KPI has got some parameters. We did not talk about the project objective as much as the KPI because it is actually the cornerstone of building the strategy, and it is the cornerstone of how to track, because it has the intervals, it has the periods to monitor, it has the target, and it has the value that to be achieved. So the first thing we talked about is the measure. If you want to achieve a certain profit next year, so you will measure the profit. This is the measure which are going to this is the item we are going to measure. Then we have the baseline of the KPI, that you don't always start from zero. If you use the same example, if your KPI is to increase the profit, so you will start by this. The last year we had 100,000 profits. So this is your baseline. How much you want to achieve next year? Probably want to make 200,000. So I start with the baseline. We always start with the baseline. The weight is how important the KPI is. And the weight is used to calculate if you have 2 or 3 KPIs for a certain objective, you use the weight to make sure that the calculation is put in place. I think we'll touch on this in a couple of slides. Then the target. What is the target of this profit? So let's say our profit target is 200,000 this year, and 25,000 every quarter. So I will monitor every quarter whether we are in the right place or not. The value is how much you achieved. So if my target is 25 for Q1, probably we achieved only 14. So our value here, the actual value is 15 or 14. The score is how much you achieve, which is basically you divide the value by the target. If your target is 25 and you achieve 12,000 only, so probably you are at 50% score. What is the trend? The trend actually is another parameter of the KPI, which is, are you in the up direction or not? If the first quarter I was scored 50%, in the second quarter I scored 60%, so I am up. I am in the right direction. I am moving up. I'm doing well. If my first quarter was 50 and the second quarter is 40, no, I'm doing bad. When I say I'm doing bad, doesn't mean that the team is doing bad. Probably I put wrong expectations. Probably I put wrong numbers. So the monitor or the tracking of this KPI helped me to set the direction of the organization. And the threshold. Threshold is when I say I am in danger. When I am between 90 and 100, I'm good. Below 90, I'm in danger, or probably below 90, I am in a kind of yellow area where I am fine. I shouldn't worry a lot. And below 75, I should worry. So this is the threshold which every organization has its own perspective. Different industries, of course, will have different thresholds. Industries like medical equipment or manufacturing vaccines, etc., they should have very, very rigid thresholds other than other environments. And finally, how much you want to report. Do you want to report weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly? It depends on the value actually of what you are measuring. But the general statement, you have to balance between long period and short period. Short period, weekly, you'll put overhead, huge overhead on yourself, on the team, on the organization to track. So people will leave the work and will work on the strategy. And of course, when they leave the work, the strategy will not be achieved. On the other hand, you should extend the period quite a lot so that you don't miss the chances to correct things. Excuse me. Okay. Now let us identify the KPIs. The KPI identification, it goes through the procedure, actually, the same procedure where I identified the objectives. You remember the same gap analysis which you produced. We got objectives from this one. So I will recall the 3 ones we have just done now and drive the KPI. The first objective is train employee on H&S. This is what we just created together a couple of minutes back. then the team will measure. The team will decide, how can we measure this? So they decided to train 20 employees per month. And also they said, if we need to obtain a national H&S certificate. So this will be the 2 KPIs for this objective. And also for the second objective, to increase the H&S workforce, means having more people. So they will manage this by hiring 1 H&S specialist and 5 H&S trainers to train the team. So this is what they believe they should achieve this one. Okay, Bhavana actually passing me a couple of questions, and I think they are coming actually, but I will leave some time at the end. I believe these questions can be handled at the end. Yes, actually, a couple of them will be answered during the session.
Thank you, Mahmoud.
Thank you very much. And so forth. Actually, for the IT, they have two objectives here, and they done the same concept where they created 2 KPIs. So they end up with a certain matrix where we have the top level, the three objectives which I started with, the sub objective, the second level objectives, and the KPI for every single objective. And then we will, for the sake of the discussion, actually we'll put also KPI for every single, we'll put the KPI for the top level as well. And this is how the hierarchy is. You start by the 3 top level objectives, then you put the KPI for these objectives, then you have the sub level objectives, and then you put the KPIs for these objectives. This is how this screen actually shows decent strategy. In fact, it had a vision and mission somewhere in the background, and then we have a couple of objectives and a couple of KPIs, and this is the time now we can start tracking and controlling them. So this is another view of how the departments are and how they create their objectives. And every single department will create the objective and KPI, and you'll see here whatever is created on this side is reflected on the top management here. So it is another presentation of how the different teams together work, and their work is reflected on the top management. And this level can be so complicated that it's any level you want, because my screen is very small, I can show only some level of the hierarchy, but it is unlimited. And the more departments you have and the more control you want to have, your matrix will be bigger and bigger. But of course, with the tools we have today, you can control this very easily. These examples of how to handle the KPI and how to update the KPI. This is a certain system that has got the cycles. So this is the KPI scored, increase the objective is increase the customer satisfaction, and the KPI actually is meant to is set quarterly, and every quarter here it shows the value and the score of this one. And I'll show this actually in the system in a minute now. Now let us see how the objective is scored. We put objectives, and I'll go back actually to this matrix. Well, it's okay. The matrix which I had everything in place. I want to measure whether I'm doing right or wrong. This screen may be a bit clumsy, but I'll just explain to you quickly. It shows here the objective, train employees on H&S. And I have 2 KPIs for this. The first KPI is train 20 employees per month and obtain a national health and safety certificate. And the target for the first KPI is 5, and actually is 4. So at the end of the quarter, I wanted to achieve 5, but I actually achieved 4 employees only trained. It means I scored 80% out of this. My KPI here is 80%. Depending on the threshold, it tells me that the 80% is good or bad. Probably 80% is good. So in certain organization, they can put the threshold from 80 to 100 is green. Probably less than 80 is yellow, and less than 50 is red. And the second objective, actually, I did not achieve anything. I should achieve 30% of the certification process. I did not. So I scored 0. So I have here two objectives, two KPIs, I'm sorry. One is scored 80%, the other one is 0. And these are the weights of these two KPIs. I gave them 50%, 50% each. They are equal weights. The objective is calculated, the objective score is calculated by multiplying the score of every objective to its weight and sum them together. So the score here is, I take the 80%, I multiply it by 50, and I add 0 multiplied by 50, and the result is 40%. So I can announce now the objective score here is 40%. This way, everyone will be in consensus. This way, everyone will know where we are, and no one will debate. So the manager can talk to or the CEO can talk to the HLS manager and tells him fairly, you do your job in this particular objective. The HLS manager will not even argue about this. He will know ahead in time that he did not do the right job. It doesn't mean that he is at fault, not necessarily. And this is why we don't want people to take the KPI as a kind of policing the employees. It is not a kind of judging whether they are a good employee or not. It is not at all. In fact, this number can be less because I put the wrong objective. Maybe I put the wrong measures. So it's only a guideline where we need to act. In this particular example, when I score 0% here, I will sit with the person in charge, identify why we scored 0. Is it because there are not enough resources? Is it because we didn't have enough budget? Then we'll take the corrective action here. Probably we'll change the 30% and make this the target to be in Q4 when we have the budget. So this is how we steer. This is what we steer your organization and make sure that you are driving in the right direction. Now we'll put the plan how to execute it. We have objectives, we have KPIs, but we need to have this executed. We have to put the plan how to execute it. It's even before we put the projects. So we need to identify the projects. We need to identify what initiatives are going to achieve these KPIs and objectives. So we are going to use the same concept, this is the same methodology, a very easy methodology. So if you go, we went step by step. We started by filling the gaps, we identified objectives, and we already identified the KPIs. So I will record every single one of these. For the health and safety, we just created 2 KPIs for every objective. We'll ask ourselves, to train 20 employees per month, what do you need to do? To obtain the certificates, what we need to do? So the experts, the people actually are doing the work will suggest, they will say, we are going to renew the company training center. We have a training center in place and this is about time to renew it. And so on. The second objective is headhunt HLS specialists. It's a project, so we'll hire people. And so on. Every single KPI will suggest what objectives are to be put in place what projects are to be put in place to achieve my KPIs and objectives. And of course, important projects linked to important or high weight KPIs and high weight objectives will be the important projects and the other way around. So this way we can decide what projects are important and what projects are less important. Now, this details actually how the result of the previous exercise. We identify the projects, we linked already the projects to objectives and KPIs. So as I said, certain objectives actually can be linked to more than one, certain projects can be linked to more than one objective. So the project that links to more objectives is more important than projects linked to one objective. If I don't have a budget, probably I will look at this project here to reduce expenses. And this is the list of the prioritized projects that shows you what are the most important ones and what the least important ones. And you'll be surprised that you'll find a project that is 16%, maybe having the less budget. Putting more budget in the project doesn't mean that you are achieving more. This project with 2% may be a higher budget than the project that achieves 16%. So it tells you where to focus and where to look at areas of importance. And this is the last step, actually. This is where you need to follow up on the execution of your strategy. You want to see something like this. You want to see a place where you have all these items put together, and you start to drill down, and you start to look at your dashboards and start to look at where areas of problems. This one shows you here a certain objective has got a strategic score 14%, which means I scored 14% on that, which is not a good number, in fact. And this is where you start to drill down. So this is the same objective, the one here in orange. And when you expand this objective, you'll see the KPIs, this area in bluish area. It tells you where the KPIs and how every KPI is impacting this objective. So this is a kind of view that tells you how things are. And this is how you track. You put you measure the KPI and set quarterly or in every period, you set the value, and then you define how % you achieved. This is how the cycles are. And these things actually, before I go to the Q&A, I just want to share with you how these things are put. You probably find these top level objectives, and you can drill down. I'll see them in different way. You can see a kind of accordion view where you have an objective and the KPIs. This is the top level, level 1 objective, and this level 2 objective with its own KPIs. And you can, in fact, drill down every single one and define what, or see what are the level 2 objectives or the KPIs of this one. You can see, in fact, the related objectives in a different view, and you can share them with other team. You can look at the KPIs. You can look at the projects, and every project you can identify the areas where you have the issues of the projects, the risks of projects, etc., etc. I don't want to take your time in this, but I think I will leave the floor now to Bhavana to share the questions and answers for this period. Bhavana, please, if you can share the questions. Actually, the questions are here.
Sure. So Mahmoud, during the course of the presentation, we got 2 questions from the audience. First up, okay. What type of clients can you make using the process you're describing?
Yes, again, sorry, what are what?
What type of clients can you make, can make use of the process you were describing? And also, who should drive this process in the organization? So this came in due in the middle of your presentation when you were talking about the process that time.
Okay. Let me start by the second part of the question. Who should do this actually? In fact, creating the strategy itself is a joint work. It's not by just one person. It starts by the top management. It is driven by the top management, in fact. But they just initiate it and they support it. But the plans should be produced by the whole organization, the whole team, mainly the functional managers. So the managers of every team, of every department will participate in this plan. But then there's another important unit should be in place that tracks the progress. And in some areas, they call it the VRO, the Vision Realization Office. Like the PMO, the Project Management Office, it used to be there for a long time to manage the projects. Now for the strategy management, there's a VRO, which is Vision Realization Office, or SRO, the Strategy Realization Office. And these teams, they track not only the strategy, they track also the project. So it is combined plans. Going back again to the first part of the question, what kinds of plans? You have mainly strategic plan and you have operational plan. The strategic plan is how our strategy is going to be achieved, the KPIs, the objectives. This is what we call the strategic plan. And then the projects in place that satisfy the strategy to put in place, it is the operational plan. So you always have a kind of 2 plans running with each other. And this is why this graph, I didn't want to talk about it a lot actually, but if you look here, the objective, you see, sorry, I need to have the English version. If you see, every objective has got strategic value and operational value. Probably another screen, but the strategic value tells you how much you achieved with KPIs, and operational, how much projects are progressing and impacting the organization. I hope I answered the question, but if not, please feel free to join our booth and I'll be there for some time to answer any other question. What's the second question, Bhavana?
So basically, what they were asking is who should drive this process in the organization and what type of clients can make use of the process you were describing. So these were the two parts of one question. So these were the only questions we had received from the audience in the live session right now.
Okay, so if there's no other question, I want to highlight what I wanted to do, but I was afraid that I may not catch the time. This example, which you see here in front of you, it shows you how the strategy is. It is 5 main objectives. And you can either drill down, as I showed you in a second, but you can have another view here where you go to the objective hub, where you have more details on the objectives, where you look at this one. Okay, when you look at the objective, and you can expand the objective, and you can see some more details. Probably I don't have a good internet now. But anyway, it can show you also the project details. This is an Arabic version actually of the system. It shows you how you can expand on the project and see some more details on this. But basically, to conclude my discussion, you need to have a system in place. And I'm going back again with what I started. My colleagues, they mentioned in last presentation, we need to work a kind of cohesively. We need to have something to manage our remote work. If you have a strategy in place, you have to make sure that the people working from home are achieving. So this kind of tools, they are the set of tools that help you to manage the organization, to manage the team within this remote distancing concept, which we live with for some time. So I think this ends my presentation. I thank everyone attended the presentation, and I hope I delivered in this short period of time the message which we wanted to deliver. And thanks, Bhavana, for the coordination of the session.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahmoud, for joining us today on the day 2 of eGov 8. We couldn't have asked for a better closing towards the end. So thank you once again for joining.
Thank you.